Be bold. Be heard. Welcome to Unmute Your Mic with your host, Jessica Bell. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Unmute Your Mic.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Unmute Your Mic. My name is Jessica Bell. I am your host from Kansas City, Missouri, as always. And thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time, welcome. If you are returning, thank you for being a part of the Unmute Your Mic family. Before we get started, please make sure to go to unmuteyourmic.org and subscribe to our newsletter, read our blog posts. Also, you can purchase merchandise. And please make sure to like and subscribe on Facebook, Instagram, and anywhere else that you would find a podcast. I'm so excited for this conversation today. I love getting to know people, and I love talking about topics that I think are very important to us in general. So, Iris, thank you so much for agreeing to be on my podcast. If you could just introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about you.
So my name is Iris McDuffie, and I am bringing you greetings from Florence, South Carolina, which is my hometown. I'm a registered dietitian with experience in renal nutrition. I've also done some community nutrition, and I just am very passionate about what I do. I really believe that most of the disease states that affect African Americans are people that look like you and I, usually are related to nutrition, and sometimes it's simply because we just don't know what to do. So I'm going to bring you some news you can use about food, nutrition, and culture.
And I think that's super important because, like you said, sometimes we just don't know. And sometimes we kind of stay in habits that are just passed down from well, this is how my mom used to cook and my grandma used to cook. And so we kind of just continue the tradition, not realizing that a lot of the issues we have may be rooted in that. Exactly. So can you talk a little bit about first, why you decided to become a licensed dietitian and kind of what that road looked like for you?
Okay, well, interestingly, you allow me to give you that introduction. Today, we are in the midst of the 8th day of National Nutrition Month. So March is always National Nutrition Month, and it's also National Kidney Month. And tomorrow will be National Registered Dietitian Day. It's always the second Wednesday of the month of March. And on Thursday, it will be World Kidney Day, which is always the second Thursday of the month of March. So we got lots of 3 things going on, but I became a dietitian because I'm very passionate about health. I don't say that we had a strong family history of a lot of health issues, but my undergrad degree is in biology, and I just fell in love with the anatomy and physiology and the workings of the body. One of my goals was to become a college instructor, which I did, and I taught your basic sciences. So that's how I got into the sciences, if you will. Always had a strong love for it. And then I decided that I would do a master's in clinical nutrition. And I discovered that in order for me to be a nutritionist, that I had to go back and become a registered dietitian by going through an internship and getting licensed and getting the registry and certified and all of that. So I kind of did mine backwards. I did the master's in clinical nutrition and then discovered that I could become a registered dietitian, but I had to go through a what they call an internship. So I did that and became a registered dietitian and immediately started working in a hospital. And my first job was on the cardiac floor with renal patients. And before doing that, I fell in love with renal patients because renal patients usually are persons who have kidney failure. And kidney failure is a result of uncontrolled diabetes or uncontrolled high blood pressure. Now, it doesn't always have to be that way, but in most instances it is. And so I found that an opportunity for me to really apply my clinical skills, my best clinical skills, and also to employ everything that I knew about science in the body. And you're constantly playing medical detective where you're trying to figure out what's causing this to not work and so on and so forth. So when you work with renal patients, sad to say, but they have so many different issues. But the important thing with renal patients is that once they get on dialysis, everything else is second. Chronic kidney disease, whether it's on dialysis, it trumps everything. So you're constantly trying to figure out how you can best stave whatever kidney function they have left, if any, to make sure it works for them. And they're just high risk for so much stuff. So as I said, the medical investigator or scientist or whatever you want to call it, it's just intriguing to be able to kind of dig through all of the grub and figure out, well, if it's not this, is that. And then I love to cook. So I'm always creative about how we can modify those diets such that we can make them kidney friendly or diabetic friendly or just healthy in general so that they can meet the needs of whatever condition we're trying to manage.
That's so interesting. And it seems like definitely a job that you would have to be, a career that you would have to be passionate about, because you're constantly having to learn. And like you said, kind of having to investigate and figure things out. And so what are some of the common things you think that you see maybe just in the Black community or just in general regarding nutrition that people don't really know?
Oh, Jessica, do we have all night? I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But to start is just basically knowing how to step outside of the box and figure out, as you said earlier, if this is something I've always done, then why wouldn't I want to learn how to do it better or change the way that I do it? And so having that conversation is always a challenge because the first thing they say is, if they ever can figure out my name, but most of the times they call me Miss Dietitian. Well, Miss Dietitian, you're trying to kill me. You're taking away all of the good foods that I want to eat. And one thing I learned early on, Jessica, was in any situation, if you're going to advise a person on a positive, something that they need to do, that you also need to make sure that you have something for them to replace it with. So if you think about people who smoke cigarettes, one of the things they do after they've given up the chase of cigarettes, they start eating all kinds of stuff because they're constantly trying to chase that desire. So the repetitive motion of putting something in their mouth. So the same thing goes true for persons who are changing their diet. When you take away a food and something that they really love, you got to also replace it with, it's going to have something very similar to the pleasures of the palate of the food that you're substituting. So I always try to do that. Sometimes it's difficult because most people look at me as a food police, or they think I cook the grits and the oatmeal, and they really think I'm magical in, okay, they want me to create a menu or diets for them to follow, but they want me to imagine that they eat this and they eat that and they eat the other. They don't want to give me a list. And I always tell them, tell me what you eat. I'm not going to be judgmental one way or the other, but I need to know what you eat so I'll know what to replace. So that's one of the biggest challenges, is making sure they understand that it's not so much what you're eating, but how much of it that you're eating, and how can we better prepare it to make it healthier, kidney friendly, heart friendly, diabetic friendly, health friendly, weight friendly, whatever the case may be. So that's one thing. Number two is in this space we're in right now with the pandemic, I think what has come to head is that there's a lot of inequity. There's a lot of social determinants of health. And I think we were able to kind of slide it under the rug, but now it's coming out full force, and it's making us meet the challenge head on. And so we still have a big issue of making sure that people of African American descent would have the same healthcare privileges, opportunities, and resources as anybody else. And we all know that's not the case. The word on the street is that when we go to the doctor and we see a specialist, sometimes they'll tell us that, oh, you're not there yet, or it's not high enough yet. And so if it's abnormal, it's abnormal. It doesn't have to be high enough yet. If it's abnormal, it's abnormal. So we need to treat it where it is so that we can prevent it from progressing to the next level. Most of our renal patients, they tell me all the time, Miss Dietitian, if I had known what I know now back then, I could have possibly protected myself. It was simple things like they gave me a blood pressure med, and I took for granted that I needed to take it every day. I took the blood pressure med, my blood pressure went down, and so I stopped taking it. And so you got that yo-yo effect of, okay, I took my blood pressure today, it went down, I stopped taking it. Oh, it's up today, I take it again, and it goes down, I stop taking it. They don't understand the consistency there. If you're taking a medication, you're taking a medication to resolve or control a situation. So you can't decide that you're going to self-medicate yourself based on the positive outcomes that may come about after you've taken it. It's a continuity. It's an issue of continuing that process. So that's another thing that I found to be an issue. And then we sometimes like to take the advice of non-healthcare professionals. We like to know if Mary said this happened to her, then doggone it, I'm going to do exactly what she says. Perfect example. When you're in a dialysis facility, a new patient comes in and they're starting dialysis, the person that's sitting on the left of them or the right, there's always going to be someone that needs to educate them about what they need to do, you know, kind of make them, what's the word? Well, educate them is the best word, but bring them up to speed. So they always tell them, okay, well, you know what? They're going to take you to do so and so and so and so and so. You don't need to do that. You know, that kind of stuff. And so that's the other thing, is educating the patients about your situation is individual to you. So if your physician had a conversation with you about what you need to do, it becomes individual. So you need to do that. You put on some blinders to what everybody else is saying, because whatever was told to them is specific to them. So those are the three things, is just making sure that we, and then one last thing is, the fourth thing is health literacy. Once we get a condition, we don't take the time to research and to educate ourselves about it. We're frightened to death to ask questions in a doctor's office because we believe that we're going to be deemed as not knowledgeable, but you can't know that you don't know until you ask the question. So I always tell my patients, health literacy is very important. Even if it is a new disease, educate yourself about it so that you're able to ask those questions when you talk to your provider. And you'll be surprised. Once you have just a little bit of knowledge, it's going to stimulate that conversation, and you're going to get a lot of questions answered simply because you are aware of those basic questions you need to ask. And it turns into something else and something else. And in the whole process, you're getting educated, but you're also being informed.
I love that you said that, because I feel like so often we hear something, or a doctor says something, and we just take it and we're like, okay, and we don't want to even talk about it anymore. Mm-hmm. We're just like, or we want to go home and, like you said, call somebody. Oh, well, somebody's auntie cousin had this before. Let's see what they said, or how did they, overcome it. And I think that happens a lot in our community.
It does.
Also, I've noticed a lot too of, like, sometimes older people not even wanting to go to a doctor at all until it's like, you know, my arm's been hurting for 15 years, but when it's about to fall off, now I'm like, I need to get to a doctor and see what.
And you know, that's where the health literacy comes in too, because as we age, if the practice has not already been there to be a person who is in a good position to manage our health, then it really becomes a bigger issue, because, you know, after I get a certain age, it doesn't really matter. But sometimes that's when it's most crucial that you take advantage of an opportunity and you try to resolve whatever may be a case, because a lot of times things happen just like the domino effect. This happens and that happens and the other happens. You get diabetes, and if you don't have high blood pressure, you get high blood pressure, and then eventually, because the kidneys are responsible for controlling the blood pressure, then you got kidney disease. And it's as simple as that. And most of the individuals, when you ask them to give a history or timeline about when stuff started to happen, they can exactly pinpoint when stuff started to change. And they can also tell you, well, I thought, I didn't believe, and I just took it for granted, those kind of things. And you can tell their voice gets kind of tender, I call it, where you could hear a hint of regret. And by that time, it's too late, because whatever damage has been done, and who knows, it could have been at the onset anyway, but at least you could have been able to kind of catch a hold of it and try to stave it from going to whatever that next level of progression is. But that's a big issue. And I don't know, I can't figure out what that's about. It's kind of bothersome to me to not be able to figure out, what causes that level of, I don't know, I don't want to know, I don't need to know.
Yes, because I've heard some very sad stories of people who, have taken themselves to the doctor right on their last leg, kind of, where it's like, well, if you would have said something 3-4 years ago, we could have started to regulate it.
Right.
And I'm also big on educating the youth, because I think that's our next generation. And
it is.
So what are some ways that you think we can make learning about health, learning about heart health, nutrition, engaging for the younger generation so that they don't make some of the same mistakes that we have?
Well, I think it starts at the home, and I also think it's a part of parenting. So if you don't have a good solid foundation of what's going on with you, it's going to be hard for you to tell someone else what they need to do. But we need to have those difficult conversations, and it starts in, I would say, elementary, finding out what little Johnny and little Mary and Alicia and Katara and all those names we have, find out what it is that they want to be in life and encourage them to be healthcare providers. Because the research says that if I go to a healthcare provider, you go to a healthcare provider that looks like me, then we're going to be able to have good dialogue, and my outcomes are going to be much better because what? We have something in common. The culture is there. But if I'm going to someone else who, because he or she is a doctor, and I'm not knocking any healthcare profession, I'm just being real. When we find that common ground and you connect, then it makes a difference, because then you feel like you can have those conversations you wouldn't normally have with just anybody. It's kind of like the best friend, your BFF. You can tell that BFF just about anything. Well, your relationship with your provider should be the same way, because this person has entrusted in you the fact that they're going to take care of you. So if you are weary about saying something to them because you don't know what to say, or you just don't feel that they have your best interest, and sometimes it may be the case, if we're from different cultures and we have a different understanding of how things are done, whether it's what we eat, how we prepare it, or what have you, then that conversation is going to look kind of this way or that way. There's never going to be a meeting of the minds. So you're going to have to make sure that you have that connection. And I think that's where rubber meets road. And that's how we come to terms about what it is that we need to know about our health. So essentially, I say we promote healthcare for our young minds, prepare them for the math and the sciences, so they'll be in a position to be competitive and feel like they fit. I just came out of the classroom. I was teaching high school for about a year and a half, and I did the health science career program. And Jessica, it was the most exciting and enlightening thing for me, because I can tell my story from the experiences that I've had. I represent 3% of the population of dietitians that are African American, of some 85,000 dietitians plus some. 3%. 3%. So that means when on a good day, when we go to the doctor, the probability of me seeing another dietitian that looks like me is going to be highly unlikely. So then that already causes a different kind of mindset in terms of how much information I'm going to share. And even if I have these burning questions, that initial conversation, if someone comes off about, well, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do the other, instead of really trying to figure out where that person is and educating them there, that's the health literacy component. And it works on both sides of the spectrum. It has to be the literacy level of the provider and the literacy level of the patient as well. And in order for us to make a meeting, a happy medium, we have to come together with all of our concerns and issues that we've heard or thought we heard or believed. They have to go out of the window, and you have to treat that person as an individual. And that's how you get to the core of the matter. If that's not there, you can forget it. The disease lingers. It gets progressively worse. We don't know what to say. We don't know how to say it. We don't know who to say it to. So then we feel kind of like, we've lost the battle. And that goes on for years. It goes on for years. And then before you know it, you have all of these chronic issues. And history repeats itself. History repeats itself quite often.
And so why do you think it is that there are so few people who get into your line of work? Why is it that there is such a low number of African-American people who are in this career field?
Well, it depends on who you ask. Okay. So if you ask somebody, some people say, well, they're not ready for the challenge of having a good background in math and science, which may be true. But then if they're not ready, get them ready. And yeah, you have to get them ready. So we have to get them ready at an early age. So if Johnny or Mary is not good in math, they shouldn't use the excuse that they're just not good in math. We need to make sure that we find programs that will give them opportunity to get good in math. So instead of them, and this is just me talking, instead of them playing basketball and getting sweaty during the summer, put them in a science camp or put them in a camp where they're going to learn a skill that will initiate another skill that will stimulate some conversation about something else. Now, realistically, we're not going to meet the needs of everybody, and everybody we send to camp is not going to come out wanting to be a doctor, nurse, or a dietitian. But exposure is always the key, because you never know what you're going to turn on. And when you turn it on and you give them that motivation to know that they can do it, the sky's the limit. The sky's the limit. I think that's it, is to make sure that we concentrate on those things that the others do to make sure that their kids are going to be in a position to move forward. And for some of us, it may take a little bit more, but you can't say that you've not made an attempt if you've never done anything to create that first step, if that makes sense. So you have to exhaust all of your resources and find out where they are. And believe it or not, there's so many programs. The STEM program, they're looking for us. They're looking for us. And all you have to do is just tell Johnny, that's where you're going. Not ask John if he wants to go to a summer camp, because the answer is going to be no. Yeah. So, the answer is going to be no. Or Mary. And it's no, because somebody has told them it's not cool to be a nerd. I'm a nerd. Yeah. I've always been one, and I'm glad to be one. Nerds, by definition, in the stigma of things, it's kind of negative, but at the end of the whole 9 yards of it, those are individuals that usually do well in whatever it is that they try to do, because they have a desire and a knack for something. And that's what we need to turn on. We need to turn on that desire and knack, just like they like to play basketball and football and all of those things that are good. But I say do both. Do both. Yeah. Make it work for you. If you play basketball, get a scholarship and be a scientist.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I like that, because you're not really pigeonholing the child into what they can do. Like, oh, if you're going to play sports, then all you can do is play sports. Mm-hmm. If you want to sing or act, all you can do is that. Like, our children have the capability to learn multiple things. And like you said, it's exposure, but it's also opportunity, giving children an opportunity to even try to say, maybe I do kind of like science. Maybe I do want to be fill in the blank in there. Because so often they don't see that. So they're only looking at, well, I want to be a basketball player or a football player or a singer, because that's what they're seeing in their face. But that's why I think it's so impactful to have somebody like you, to where if they, they can go into a hospital or a doctor's office and see somebody that looks like them, they're able to say, wow, this is that I can do something else other than the things that I just see all the time. Exactly.
And I think exposure is the key. Nobody is better or greater or has any more neurons or brain cells than the other. It's exposure, what we've been exposed to. So if I expose you to Taco Bell and you like it, if I expose you to Taco Bell and you like it, then the next thing to do is take it to another level. Exposure to something else. It's all about exposure and just making sure that even if it's a point where they are hesitant about having an experience when they've been exposed, then pull them to the side and ask them, hey, what is it about this you don't like? Or feed them positive toxicity, as they say. Give them some good stuff to work with, and always present them with an opportunity for a good outcome in the end. But I could go on and on and on and on and on and on about that. The sciences are a way to go, because you can pretty much create your path.
I love that. Okay, I want to go back, and I do want to go back to something that you had said a little bit earlier. So you talked about when you were kind of giving people advice or information on how to change how they're eating. You try to take something that they normally eat and give them like the healthier version of it. So how do you do that for people who are low income, who maybe are living off of things like ramen noodles and McDonald's because the income is not there? How do you kind of shift those poor eating habits to something that's healthier but still price friendly? Because I hear people say all the time, it's too expensive to eat healthy.
Well,
Like
that's a good point. But I think what you have to have a meeting of the minds, and you have to create opportunities. So one of the things I'd like to do in my city is to have grocery store tours. And, the key to grocery store tours anymore, everybody has a cell phone. So if you can't get them to go to the grocery store because they don't have transportation, they got a cell phone. So you create a virtual grocery store tour. I mean, everything. There's a app called Doodly, that I'm dying to work with it, but I think that's going to be a way that I'll be able to do my podcast because it's animation and people love to be animated. And if you animate them on something that's good for them, it brings them back to something that's going to be useful. And they'll go back to that because of the format in which it was presented. So with low income, I think seek every opportunity to educate. And one of my main focuses is to go into your faith-based institutions, to go into your recreation centers. And that's hard, Jessica, because most people want you to do that for free. And so you can't pay your bills with love and good nutrition. I mean,
yes. No, listen, I understand because I'm a teacher. Mm-hmm. But also I was, doing programs and stuff and going into like juvenile detention centers and churches, and they always want it to be free. And it's kind of like, how do you balance the, wanting to give back to your community, but having bills that need to be paid?
Well, I think the other thing too is something that has really hit hard home. And I've been contemplating the idea and thinking about it and playing around it for years. And that is just getting a 501(c) where you're able to somewhat control what you do, but at the same time, there's funds for that. And there's so much funding out there, it looks like now, for 501(c)s, and just tailoring your program to fit the needs of the community. And I don't think that you'll go wrong there. I have a desire to do a summer nutrition camp where they meet in the summer every other week. And then at the end of the summer, they have a culminating event where they invite their moms or their parents, and then they do a cooking demo, and then you have a tasting. And then those who participated in this year will actually recruit another person, a friend, for the next year. And you build that coalition, or you build that community, or you build that cohort. And so before you know it, you have 10 years have passed and everybody have participated in the summer nutrition program. And I promise you, if you do that, you'll find that out of those summer nutrition programs, somebody's bound to follow the STEM program. They're going to be a scientist, they're going to be a technologist, they're going to be an engineer, they're going to be a mathematician. And they may even pursue medical school simply because of that, or they may become a nurse after that. So those kinds of things. But the difficulty is that if there's no funding to do it, because some of these kids, they're not going to be able to come because there's just not that kind of support. So you have to have something that's going to be, it's just like the rec centers. I've tried my best to talk to the rec centers and say, okay, it's good for them to play basketball all day, but give them something that's going to afford them opportunity to build on when they go back to school. Conversation. When I went to summer camp, I learned about carbohydrates, or I saw a dietitian, or I saw a nurse, or I saw a football player who's now a doctor. Those kinds of things, because those things make impacts they're very impactful, and they make huge impacts on the brain. And it makes for a good, uplifting, motivational something for the person who feels like this is all I can do because they think where I am is what I am. And that's not always true.
And I think what you're doing is so inspirational. So thank you for that, because there needs to be more people who kind of talk about the things that it may not be sexy to talk about diets and eating healthy, but that's literally what if we are not around to fulfill all the things that we're supposed to be doing, then it's kind of purposeless to have all these dreams and all these goals. It's something I say all the time is like, I don't want to just live to be, 100, but I want to have a good quality of life. I don't want to be on 75 medications and, doing all of these things because I want to have a good quality of life. And so I think pouring into the young community and talking to them about that, but also educating adults too.
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of things that me being 33 years old, I've learned just in the last couple of years that, I wasn't taught at 10 or 11, but I still have a lot of life left and want to be educated on, how do I make this just a smoother ride for the rest of my life?
I understand that too. And that's what reaching those minds, because I oftentimes when I would teach a lesson or have a new concept that I want to share, I would say, listen, let me give you a few tips. This is how it is. And I'm not telling you from something I heard. I'm telling you what happened to me. This is what is going to happen. And that's why I'm telling you need to take this road. If you take this road, I promise you'll be looking for me and telling me how much money you made. And I really want to give a contribution to you. And that really is a side joke, because I'm not looking for anybody to give anything. But at some point, you'll look back and you'll say, Miss McDuffie told me that, or where have I heard that from? You know what? I didn't believe her, but it's true. And I think if we share those life tidbits and those nutrition tips, I think it makes for good, healthy living. And I can't tell you how many people, because I love to cook and I love to go to nice restaurants and I like to be able to come back and put together that stuff in my kitchen. They ask me, did you grow up with this kind of stuff? No, but I love food. So I don't mind putting it together and making it pretty and delightful and delectable to eat. And, most people don't even like to cook. So if you don't like to cook, I know you're not going to be exploring what you can cook and eat different than, So that's the other thing is fine tuning those skills that were once a major part of everyday life, and then bringing back the creativity, the fun, and the excitement to that. And there's so many things you can do with just playing with food, I call it.
So we're definitely gonna have to do a part two, because I don't know how it already got to 30 minutes, but I definitely want to hear more about the nutrition side of like you cooking and how you're able to do that in a healthy way. So I would love to have you come back on and kind of talk about that too. Because you have so much great information that I think people need to hear that we don't often hear. And so I think it would be really beneficial for some people to know about kind of supplementing different types of food. So, if you love eating fried chicken and smothered whatever, how we can make food still enjoyable. Because I think most people, even myself included, when you think about certain kind of eating, it sounds boring, or it sounds like, oh no, I can't eat all the things that I love, when it's really just, we get kind of stuck in a habit of things that we just eat, and we haven't expanded our taste palette almost, to try.
And the creativity of that. Yeah. Yeah. I've actually taken, like some of these cooking, like Williams Sonoma, they have technique classes. They used to have technique classes. Of course, it was a promotion for you to buy every device so you could use it.
Of course.
But once you take that class, it opens up a whole new world of things that you probably saw in a fancy restaurant, but you just didn't know how to do it. And it's simple. I mean, it's really simple. So I love to do stuff like that. I wish I could get the support I needed for someone to sponsor like a cooking class. I want to do it on the side, so I don't want anybody looking for me every week, but maybe twice.
Right. Not every week.
Not every week. Yeah.
Well, listen, we're going to have to stop this part 1, but I would definitely love to have you back on for that.
Okay.
And just thank you again for everything that you are doing, for taking the time to talk to people and educate them. Because sometimes we can find out information, but you don't always have to share it with other people. You could just be like, well, I'm going to be healthy and I'm going to live a long life. And
that's right.
Good. But you actually are taking the time to educate not only youth, but adults, and from people, you know, who are extremely young to extremely old. Everybody needs to know how to just live a better quality of life. And so I thank you for doing that. And I appreciate that you are an inspiration too. It is women's, today is, I think, Women's International
Day, and it's also National Women's Month too. So I wanted to do
perfect.
Yes, exactly. We're covering about 5 different topics. Yeah.
You're checking all the boxes. So I just thank you again for this conversation.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
I enjoyed it.
Me too. Me too.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another episode of Unmute Your Mic. As always, you can go to unmuteyourmic.org. There you can see our past episodes, purchase merchandise, all of that good stuff, read our blog. Also, please make sure to like, subscribe, and follow on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and anywhere that you would find a podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Unmute Your Mic. Don't forget to be bold, be heard, and continue to unmute your mic. Have a good night, you guys.
Thank you for tuning in to Unmute Your Mic. Be sure to tune in next time when Jessica takes her mic off mute as she continues her journey to find stories that inspire and uplift our community.